Am I the asshole for fixing my daughter's car when her boyfriend said he'd handle it? My daughter, 21F, and I have always been pretty close. She moved in with her boyfriend a couple months ago. It was a little tough seeing her move out, but I know she's an adult and building her own life. She drives an old Corolla with a lot of miles on it. A couple weeks ago, she mentioned the steering wheel had started shaking when she got up to highway speeds, and sometimes the front end would shudder when she braked. She told me her boyfriend said he would take care of it. Another week went by, and it still hadn't been looked at. Last weekend, she came by my place and said it was getting worse, and it was starting to make her nervous to drive. So I took it for a quick drive, and sure enough, the wheel was shaking pretty good around 60 miles per hour, and it shuddered when I hit the brakes. I pulled the front wheels off in the driveway, and it was pretty obvious the front brake rotors were warped and the brake pads were worn unevenly. I ran to the parts store, grabbed new rotors and pads, and swapped them out that afternoon. Took a couple hours, and after that, the car drove smooth again. My daughter was really happy and thanked me a bunch. To me, it wasn't a big deal. I've worked on cars most of my life, and she's my kid. A few days later, she and her boyfriend came over for dinner. At one point, he pulled me aside and told me I shouldn't have fixed the car. He said it was his responsibility as her boyfriend to handle that kind of thing, and that by doing it myself, I stepped on his toes. I told him I wasn't trying to prove anything. The car was getting worse and I just fixed it while she was there. Since then, he's been pretty short with me and the vibe has been a little weird. My daughter says he feels like I undermined him. From my point of view, she's still my daughter. And if something on her car is unsafe and I can fix it in an afternoon, I'm going to. But here's the thing. The story didn't end there. And if I'm being honest, the car was just the beginning of something I wasn't ready to see. Her name is Lily, my daughter. She's had my eyes since the day she was born. Dark brown, a little too observant for her own comfort sometimes, and she's always been the kind of kid who holds things together on the outside while quietly falling apart somewhere private. I know that about her because I raised her mostly alone after her mother Diane left when Lily was 11, not dramatically, not in a blaze of screaming and slammed doors. Diane just kind of drifted out of our lives the way some people do, like a tide going out, and one day the shoreline was just me and this little girl who had decided, apparently, that she wasn't going to cry about it. I cried about it. She made me grilled cheese and told me it was going to be fine. So yeah, we're close. His name is Derek. Derek Cole, 26 years old, works in sales for some tech company, the kind of vague employment description that tells you nothing except that he owns exactly one blazer and considers himself entrepreneurial. I want to be fair here. When Lily first introduced us, about 10 months ago, I didn't dislike him. He was charming, attentive, asked me about my work in a way that seemed genuine. He shook my hand too firmly, the way men do when they're performing confidence rather than actually having it, but I wrote that off. I've met a lot of people in my life, and first impressions are a narrow window. What changed my temperature on Derek was slow. Gradual, the kind of thing that doesn't announce itself as a warning sign. It just accumulates, like sediment, until one day you look down and realize you're standing in 3 inches of it. The first thing I noticed was the way he answered for her. Not constantly, not in a way that would make anyone at a dinner table raise an eyebrow. Just sometimes, she'd start to say something and he'd finish it, smoothly, without breaking the conversational rhythm, and she'd laugh and nod and go quiet. I told myself that was a couple's thing. Some couples finish each other's sentences. It's a form of intimacy. The second thing was the car, not the brake rotor specifically, the pattern. Because here's what nobody in this situation has mentioned yet. The steering wheel starting shaking about 3 weeks before Lily finally told me about it. She let that go for 3 weeks without pushing back on Derek's "I'll handle it," because as she explained to me almost in passing one afternoon, he didn't like it when she seemed like she didn't trust him. Those were her exact words. He didn't like it when she seemed like she didn't trust him. I filed that sentence away like a document you're not sure you'll need, but aren't willing to throw out. The dinner where Derek pulled me aside happened on a Thursday. My sister Karen had given me a cast iron Dutch oven for Christmas, and I'd been wanting to use it, so I made a pot roast. The kind that takes 4 hours and makes the whole house smell like something good is happening. Lily seemed happy when they arrived. She was wearing a yellow dress I hadn't seen before, and her hair was down, and she hugged me at the door the way she used to when she was a kid, both arms, no half measures. Derek came in behind her with a bottle of red wine he'd clearly just grabbed from a grocery store shelf. The sticker was still on the bottom, and he smiled at me in that way he has, broad and practiced, and I thought, okay, this'll be a good evening. It was a good evening mostly. We talked about a vacation Lily was hoping to take, something about the Pacific Northwest, hiking trails she'd been researching. Derek talked about a deal he was close to closing at work, and I listened and asked the right questions, and he seemed to relax a little, which relaxed me. By dessert, I'd almost forgotten about the car entirely. Then Lily went to the kitchen to slice the pie I'd made. She'd insisted on doing it herself, an old ritual from her childhood when she'd decided slicing pie was her job at family meals. And Derek turned to me across the table and the relaxed expression was gone, not replaced by hostility. Just gone, the way a light goes off. Suddenly his face was doing something more deliberate. He said what I already told you, he said, that I shouldn't have fixed the car, that it was his responsibility, that I'd stepped on his toes. I'm a measured person. I've spent 40 years learning how to stay measured. I heard him out. I told him I understood his perspective. I told him I understood his perspective. I told him I hadn't been trying to make any kind of statement. I said the car was unsafe and fixable, and so I fixed it, and I meant all of that. But sitting here now, writing this out, what I actually remember most about that moment is his eyes. Because while his voice was calm and reasonable and even a little wounded, performing the injured party, his eyes were doing something different. They were watching me very carefully. Not like someone airing a grievance, like someone establishing a boundary and waiting to see if it would hold. I've thought about that look a lot since then. About 2 weeks after the dinner, Lily called me on a Tuesday morning, which she never does. She works Tuesdays, has back-to-back meetings until noon, and she knows I have my own routine. So a Tuesday morning call made me sit up a little straighter before I even answered. She said everything was fine. She said she just wanted to talk. We talked for about 20 minutes about nothing in particular, a book she was reading, a coworker she thought was funny, whether I'd watched the documentary she'd recommended, and when we were almost done, she said, casual as anything, Derek thinks I call you too much. I didn't say anything for a beat. Then I said, what do you think? She laughed a little. I think I call you exactly the right amount. Good, I said. Then keep doing that. She said okay. We said goodbye. I put the phone down and sat with that conversation for a long time. Derek thinks I call you too much. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. I know there are fathers who don't know how to let their daughters go, who hover and intrude and make their kids' romantic lives smaller because they can't tolerate not being the most important man in the room. I've met those fathers. I've recognized the impulse in myself on bad days and consciously pushed back on it. So I'm aware of the trap in what I'm about to say. But I'm going to say it anyway. A man who feels threatened by a woman's relationship with her father, not an intrusive relationship, not a codependent one, just a warm and functional one, is telling you something important about himself. He is telling you that he needs to be her whole world. And men who need to be someone's whole world are almost never doing that for the woman's benefit. I didn't say any of this to Lily. I'm her father, not her therapist, and she hadn't asked for my opinion. But I started paying attention differently after that call. The next time I saw them together was at my place about 3 weeks later, a casual Sunday afternoon thing. Lily had mentioned wanting to help me finally sort through some boxes I'd had in the spare room since I moved. Old photos, Lily's childhood stuff, a box of her grandmother's things. I'd been avoiding for 2 years. It was the kind of afternoon project that should have been easy and comfortable, and for a while, it was. We sat on the floor with boxes around us and Lily held up old photos and laughed and cried a little and I told her stories she'd never heard about her grandmother, and it was genuinely lovely. Derek sat on the couch most of the time scrolling his phone. That's not an accusation. I don't expect a boyfriend to have deep feelings about someone else's family memorabilia, but I noticed that when Lily would call him over to look at something, to share a moment, he'd come and look and then go back to his phone. And once, when she was reading aloud from a letter her grandmother had written, and her voice caught a little, I watched Derek glance up and then look back down without a word, not a hand on her shoulder, not even eye contact. I kept my face neutral. I handed her a tissue. I told her grandmother had been the strongest woman I'd ever known. I watch my daughter carefully. I always have. And what I was watching, across those weeks, was a young woman who had moved in with someone and was slowly, almost imperceptibly, making herself smaller. The way she prefaced opinions with, I might be wrong, but, when she'd always been confident. The way she checked her phone in the middle of our conversations, not rudely, just anxiously, as if she was monitoring something. The way she'd started saying we about preferences that I was pretty sure were just Derek's, restaurants they liked, opinions on things, plans that sounded like his agenda with her name attached. None of this individually was evidence of anything. I know that. Relationships change people. That's not always bad. But the direction of the change mattered, and the direction I was watching was toward less certainty, less ease, less of the particular brightness Lily has always had when she's comfortable in a room. About a month after the dinner, I had a conversation with my neighbor Rich, who happened to mention that he'd seen Derek pulling into my driveway on a Wednesday afternoon when I'd been out of town for a work thing. That was strange because Lily hadn't mentioned stopping by, and when I casually brought it up with her later, she seemed briefly confused and then said she thought they'd just been in the neighborhood. It was a small thing, an odd thing. I left it alone. What I didn't leave alone was the pattern. Because I kept returning to Derek's conversation with me in my own dining room, to the precision of it, to the way he'd framed fixing a brake job as a territorial violation, as his responsibility, as my overreach. And I thought about how that framing, if you applied it consistently, would mean that anything I did for my own daughter was potentially a challenge to his authority. Helping her with the car was undermining him. Talking to her too often was something he monitored and named. Being close to her, apparently, was something he had opinions about. I'm a quiet person. I'm not someone who makes speeches. But I have been around long enough to recognize when someone is drawing a perimeter around a person I love. And I know what the next few years look like if no one says anything. I called Lily on a Saturday morning. A Tuesday would have felt pointed, and I asked if she wanted to get breakfast. Just the two of us, somewhere with good coffee and bad lighting where nobody hurries you. She said yes before I finished the sentence. We sat across from each other in a corner booth for almost 2 hours. I didn't come in with an agenda. I came in with French toast and the willingness to listen to absolutely anything she needed to say, for as long as she needed to say it. What came out wasn't dramatic. It rarely is at first. It was small things, the kind that don't seem like much until you lay them all out on the table together and step back and take a look. Derek's moods, which were unpredictable. The way he'd go quiet for days if she made a plan without checking with him first. The comment about her calling me too much, which had not been a one-time thing. A version of the car conversation that she'd been having with him about other things too. The sense that she kept, somehow, doing things wrong that she hadn't known were wrong. She wasn't crying. That's the thing about Lily. She held herself together in that measured way she'd been holding herself together since she was 11 years old. But she was looking at me across the table with a particular expression of someone who has been carrying something they couldn't name and has just realized with some relief and some grief that someone else can see it too. I didn't tell her what to do. I want to be clear about that. She's 21 and she's smart and she doesn't need her father to script her life. I just told her what I'd always told her, which is that she's not too much. That calling her dad is not a problem to be managed. That a person who loves her should make her feel bigger, not smaller. That she is allowed to take up space in her own life. She looked out the window for a while after I said that. Then she nodded. I paid the check. She hugged me in the parking lot for a long time, the way she had at the door the night of the pot roast dinner. Both arms, no half measures. And when she drove away in that little blue Corolla, smooth, tracking straight, braking clean. I watched her go and I let myself feel, for the first time in weeks, something close to hope. Because here's what I know, after 21 years, about my daughter. She is not a woman who stays somewhere that makes her feel small. She has her grandmother's spine. She just sometimes needs someone to remind her it's there. So no, I don't think I'm the asshole for fixing the brakes. I think I'm her father, and I was always going to fix the brakes. That was never really the question. The real question, the one I'd been sitting with since that dinner, since that phone call, since that Saturday morning breakfast, is whether I did enough of the other things, whether I said the right things at the right time, whether I was present in the ways that actually mattered. I'm still not sure of the answer, but I know where she is if she needs me. She's always known that too.